Begin today the Gemara on Daf Ches Amud Beis, 9 lines up from the bottom of the page, where the Gemara starts Omar Abaya. We're talking over here about a person that is selling his properties, and there's different halachas here that the Gemara brings up in connection to this. What happens when you sell your property to someone? Let's see. So here the Gemara brings another din. Omar Abaya, Reuven Shomacha Sada l'Shimon ba'achrayis. Reuven sells a property to Shimon, and he makes it clear that he's taking responsibility, that if anything happens to this property, anybody comes and claims that they were owed money by the seller, and therefore they're confiscating it from the buyer. So the seller says, I'm going to take responsibility to compensate you for this. And that's what happened. The Balchayv, a lender of Reuven, comes along, and v'taraf Shimon, and he wants to confiscate this property from Shimon. So Dinuhu, the halacha is here, the Ozl Reuven. So Reuven, the seller, can go umishtoi dina ba'adei, and he could go at the din Torah and argue with this lender that's trying to confiscate the property from the buyer, from Shimon. Even though at the bottom of Daf Ches, even though the actual din Torah right now is between this Balchayv and Shimon. This Balchayv is trying to confiscate the property from Shimon, and the Balchayv turns to Reuven and says, you don't own this property anymore. So don't mix into the din Torah. It doesn't work that way. He is allowed to come and be present and argue and put his claims forward at the din Torah. The Balchayv can't say, you're not here in this din Torah, you don't belong here at all. Because Reuven says, as soon as you confiscate the property from Shimon, the buyer, alai hoda, he's coming back to me to get reimbursed.
That's not the problem. The problem is that the Meicha owes him the money.
True, but Taisus over here points out that whatever taina the Meicha, which is the borrower himself, could say, Bezdin says all those tainas for him. That's the halacha. We always come to the protection of a lekeach and toyanin. Bezdin will taina for the lekeach, whatever the Meicha could taina. So therefore, the Balchayv says, I'm taking away this property from Shimon, and you don't have anything to say over here. It's all about that loan. So Bezdin tainas already. So Rashi here actually says, if so, you might ask, if Bezdin tainas everything, so who needs Reuven to come and taina? So what Rashi says, there is something where when a person comes and is trying to collect his loan, you can come and say, Ishtabali deloi praticha, I want you to swear that I didn't pay you. And if the malva himself, if the loiva that is, if the loiva, the borrower over here, Reuven, is present, it's going to be harder for the malva to swear. When you have to swear that I never got paid and the borrower himself is not present, it's easier to make a shvuah sheker. But if the person himself is there, so then that scares him from swearing falsely. So therefore that's what it's saying here, that he can come and be present at the din Torah and make him swear that he didn't get paid yet. Okay, now the Gemara continues and says, Ve'ike the Omri. There's another opinion that takes us a step further and says, Afil shaloi b'achrayis nami. Even if Reuven sold the property and he didn't take any responsibility to reimburse Shimon, if it comes and it gets confiscated, it doesn't matter. He can still come and be involved in the din Torah. The Amalei, because Reuven can still say, I don't want Shimon to have any complaints against me. I sold him a property, and here now look, it got confiscated because of a loive, of a milva that is. So that itself is enough of a reason that he's a party that's involved in this story here, and therefore he can be present at the din Torah. Abaye said another halacha, Reuven shemacha sada l'Shimon. Reuven sold the property to Shimon, shaloi b'achrayis, and he did not take any responsibility if it gets confiscated. And then what happens is v'yatzu alel asikin, and then there comes somebody that challenges the ownership of this property, and he says, "This property that Reuven sold you, Reuven's a ganav. He never owned it. It belongs to me." So now what happens? The buyer over here wants to retract from the sale, obviously. So the halacha is, before the buyer made a kinyan, before he made a chazakeh, so he can retract from this, even though there was already a deal, they made up, he's going to buy it, but before the chazakeh, he could back out from the sale. But once he made a chazakeh, so then he can't back out, even though he's going to lose. Now he's going to lose this property, and the seller, Reuven, is not going to have to reimburse him, because he clearly told him that I'm not taking any responsibility, but he can't back out, it's too late. My time, why? Because the seller will tell him, the kitri, a bag tied, closed with full of air inside of it, savris v'kiblis. You accepted, you took it, I sold you this property, and look, I clearly told you I'm not taking any responsibility. He probably charged him cheaper for this reason, but it doesn't matter. This is your risk that you took, and the fact that it's getting confiscated now, it's your loss. This is Rashi's pshat in the Gemara. Taisus' pshat in the Gemara over here is when it says Achalei hichzik ba, they already made a kinyan. And even after the kinyan, the Gemara is saying that he could have charata. But still, even after the kinyan, the Gemara will soon explain that there's an additional, after you already make the kinyan, there's an additional chazakeh that you still have a period of time that you can be chayzer from this sale. And that's, okay, what does the Gemara say now? Me'emas havoy chazakeh. From what point is it a chazakeh? Michidayesh hametzri. When you go and you walk on the border of the field. So according to Rashi's pshat, this means the dayesh hametzri is the kinyan. According to Taisus' pshat, no. Dayesh hametzri means they made already the kinyan. Dayesh hametzri is when you walk around, you go, it's an additional thing. You go around all the borders of the field, that's after the kinyan. And you went and you walked around in the field, then it becomes too late to retract from the sale. Now the Gemara says, V'davke shaloi bachrayis. This is all if the seller didn't take responsibility to reimburse. But if he took responsibility to reimburse him, so then, even after he made the kinyan, and according to Taisus, even after he walked around in the property, you can back out from the sale. Why? Because you can tell the seller, listen, you're anyways going to have to reimburse me. So why should we say that the sale is in effect and then you'll reimburse me? I'm backing out from the whole thing. You can go ahead and back out right away. There's another opinion on this that says, no, that even if the seller, he sold him and he said, I'm taking responsibility and I'll reimburse you, and now it turns out that it wasn't his property and he has to reimburse him, still, once he made a proper kinyan and he walked around on the borders, he can't retract from the sale. The seller says, listen, for now the sale is in effect. So true, the guy took it away from you. Okay, you'll go to Bezdin and you'll get a document from the Bezdin that will show that you have the right to get reimbursed from me. And when you'll get that document, I'll reimburse you. But for now, the sale is in effect. Okay, this is the conclusion here of this last blot and a half, where the Gemara discussed various different cases of a person that sells the property and people come and confiscate it in relation to a loan and different kinds of payments. And the Gemara comes back to something that it began with on Daf Zayin, Amud Aleph, where there the Gemara spoke about the payment for damages. And there the Gemara asked the contradiction that in one pasuk it says that Meitav Sadeo, you have to pay from the best of your properties. And in another pasuk by Boyer it says Kesef Yoshev Lubalov, and the pasuk, the Braisa there says Yoshev means you can pay even subin. You can pay even brand, garbage, the lowest quality as a payment. So there's a contradiction. So the Gemara before brought an answer for that. Here the Gemara brings another pshat, another answer. Rav Huna says to answer that question, Oy kesef, oy meitav. What we learn from these two psukim are that you have an option. Either you pay kesef. If you pay cash, so then that's the best. Over there, there's no issue. That's one option. Oy meitav. Or if you're not paying in cash, you're giving from your properties as a payment. So then from the properties you have to give the best. So meitav only refers to when you're giving properties, but when you're paying kesef, cash, that's another option. Obviously, that's the best. That's the pshat in the two psukim. So the Gemara asks right away on this. Rav Nachman asked, but how could you say that the choice is either cash or a property and the best property? But it says in the pasuk Yoshev, the Braisa says that it doesn't just say pay kesef. It says Yoshev, return. This term Yoshev says l'rabbi shove kesef, that it includes anything that's valuable as kesef, and afil subin, even to give subin, the lowest quality. So how can you say that it's either kesef or meitav? So the Gemara answers, Hacha b'mayaskina, on this drasha of the pasuk that says that you have the ability to give even subin, usually you're not allowed to give subin. But what's the pasuk saying? B'delesle. When that's all he has. He has no other mode of payment. He has no cash. He has no karka. All he has is some garbage object to give. And then the pasuk is saying that you pay with the subin. Says the Gemara, that's the pshat. Ida lesle. If he has nothing else, pshita. Obviously, this is what he pays with. He has nothing else. So there is no other option. You don't need a pasuk for that. And says the Gemara, no, you do, because ma'od deteime, I would think to say, amrin lei, we say to this mazik, look, you were mazik someone. It's not right that you should pay him with garbage. Zil trach zovin, go take whatever object you have, which is a very low quality object. You go and sell it, and va'isele kesef, and you'll bring him the cash. You can't pay him with this subin. You have to go and sell and bring him cash. Kamash Malone, that's why the pasuk is saying that if you have cash, then you have the option of giving him kesef, and if you're giving him from a karka, you have to give from meitav. But if you have nothing else right now in your possession, so you give subin. That's all you pay. Okay, from here, this is the klal we see here from this pasuk, that whatever the person has in his possession right now, that's what he pays with. If he doesn't have from the best, so then he's going to have to, he pays only with subin. Amar Ravasi, in connection to this, said the halacha.
You need a pasuk for that.
You do need a pasuk for that. Otherwise, we would say that since the pasuk says, if the pasuk would clearly say that you only have two options, meitav or kesef, then it's going to be your business to make sure that you get a hold of meitav or kesef. That's how you have to pay. Amar Ravasi said, ksafim harehein kekarka, that money, cash, is equivalent to karka itself. That's what he said. Now, that's all. That's the statement. Well, now the question is, Lamai Hilchasa, regarding what halacha did he say that kesef is like karka? If you're going to say he was saying this, linya meitav, regarding the payment that we just spoke about, that a mazik, he can pay from karka, from the best, and he can pay kesef. And kesef is equivalent to the karka of the meitav. Says the Gemara, Haina de Rav Huna. Rav Huna already said this. So why would Rav Asi be repeating this halacha? Elo, says the Gemara, maybe we could say that he was referring to the following case. L'shnei achim, two brothers that are inheriting from their father. Shacholku, they're dividing their inheritance. V'notel echal karka, and when they divided the inheritance, so there was cash and there was properties. So one of them went and he gets the karka, the fields, the properties. V'echal ksofim, and the other one takes the cash. Now what happens? So now a lender comes to collect a loan that their father owed. And the not karka, from where does he collect? He could only collect the karka. From any cash that's left over from a person, a b'chayv does not have the right to collect. He could only collect from his properties. That's the shibud is on the karka. That's what he could collect from. So he goes and confiscates from the properties. So now it turns out that one of the sons over here that inherited loses out from this. So now what happens is the ozal hai v'shakal palge b'ksafim ba'adei. So now this one that just gave up from his karka for this lender will go and take from some of the cash that his brother got in the inheritance, so that it should be fair. So that's so now the Gemara is suggesting maybe this is what Rav Asi meant when he said that ksafim is like karka, that even though they split, he got kesef and the other one got karka. But so you may think, so the kesef is mine and the karka is yours, and therefore if you have a problem with your karka, then don't bother me about it. So we say, no. We do the split, the kesef and the karka, they're equivalent to each other. And if the karka is confiscated by a lender, so then the kesef is going to have to be reimbursing him for this karka that was taken away. That's the halacha that Rabasi was saying. But the Gemara says that there's no chiddush in this. Ravasi doesn't have to teach this to us. Pshita, this is an obvious fact. Because what are you going to say? Hi bro, hi lavra. He's a son and he has, so therefore he should lose out by the fact that the inheritance that he got from the karka will go to the lender. And hi lavra, the other one is not a son. He has the cash and he doesn't have any of this responsibility. Why should one get more of an inheritance than the other? So that's not the case. Ikedamri, there's actually another opinion that says, no, it actually does work the opposite. And it's pashut that it's the opposite. Adarabe, on the contrary. Le'idach gisa, it works the other way around. What happened over here? There's cash and there's properties. The inheritance of cash has its risks, and the inheritance of properties has its risks. When they decided, I'm taking the cash and you're taking the karka, each one agreed that he's getting his portion with whatever risks it comes with. So the Amalei, so the one that got the cash says, look, lahachi shaklik sofim. This was the reason why I took the cash, because there's a certain risk involved in this. The mignevi, if the cash that I got will get stolen, loy mishtalam neminach. I'm not going to come running to you and say that you have to reimburse me for this. And on the other hand, you took the properties, and there's a risk in that as well. The mitrefe, that if it gets confiscated from you by a lender, loy mishtalamna or loy mishtalmu lach midiminoy. You're not going to come and get paid from me. So each one, this is the deal. This is how we divided this. So therefore, the Gemara is saying, Adarab, it's pashut that the kesef and the karka have nothing to do with each other. Each one gets what they get, and they remain with their money. He remains with his money, and he remains with whatever karka he has left over for himself.
The money, the kesef is. The shibud was before the father passed away.
Hanami, true.
But and the kesef wasn't that problem.
No, but the kesef, when the father's alive, so he can pay with kesef. Once the father passes away, there is no shibud for the loan on the kesef anymore. The kesef is free and clear. The shibud remains just on the karka. So he's telling him, you took the karka, that's where the shibud is. The kesef has no connection to this shibud, and I took the kesef with whatever risks taking kesef carries. It's two separate things. Ella says the Gemara, maybe what the halacha that Ravasi is saying, that kesef and karka are equivalent, he was trying to say something else. Also regarding inheritance. And here the Gemara actually brings a machlokes about this, and a few different opinions here. In a case where there were two brothers that divided the inheritance of their father, and here the case is a bit different. Not that one took cash and the other took karka, they both took the karkais and they divided the properties. Now, this Balchayv came, and he confiscated for his payment of his loan the property of one of them. So they all got properties, but he confiscated just from one of them. And the Taisus over here says, and other Rishonim say similar. Why did he go only to one of them? Because there was a specific deal with the father, the borrower, that the collection of the loan is going to be from that karka. It's what's called an apoitiki, that he said, I'm going to collect from this karka. So therefore now the lender came and collected his loan from one karka and not from another karka that another son inherited. So now over here, what's the halacha? Does this brother, the other brother that has another piece of karka, now have to reimburse his brother? So here there's a three-way machlokes about this. So we're over here. Rav Amar. So Rav says batla machlokes. So the original division of the properties. I missed something. So regarding this case over here, there's a three-way machlokes, and we'll see in a moment what Rav Asi holds. So here the Gemara brings va'amra Rav Asi chodezimna. Rav Asi already spoke about this case a different time, and he already told us his opinion about this case. So here there's a three-way machlokes about what happens in such a case. If brothers divided the properties of the father. And now a Balchayv came and confiscated from the property of one of them. So Rav says, Botla machlokes, the original division is nullified. You have to redivide again. And the reason why this is because Rav says when you divide the Yerusha, so we say yesh breira, meaning when you divide it now, this retroactively reveals what was really yours in the beginning when the father died. So if it turns out that there was a lender here, that part of this property belongs to him, so then we have to go and redivide it from the beginning. So because what we did turns out to be wrong. Shmuel Amar, however, Shmuel says no, Vitter. The one that the property got confiscated from him for the collection of this loan, he loses. That's it, he loses out. And the reason why Shmuel holds Vitter is, Rashi explains, because Shmuel's opinion is that when you divide the properties of Yerusha, it's like a lakuchais. Originally, they all owned it together. They were all inheritors. But over here, once you split, what's the splitting? The splitting is, it's like buying. I'm selling you this piece of property in return for you selling me another piece of property, and they're like buyers. So what I got and what the other person got is independent from each other, and they have no connection. Okay, but again, going back to what I said before, this is all only in the case where the lender came specifically to one person for a reason. I mean, otherwise, the other brother could say, why did he... The one that got confiscated from him could say, why did he come only to me? He should have collected it from you. So as I mentioned, there's an apaitiki. He came to one because there was a certain apaitiki on that field. But according to Shmuel, once this happens, it's too bad. It's too late. Now it's like a sale. It's like I bought my part and you bought your part. And that's it. Ravasi says that we do this half and half, meaning Ravasi has a suffix if to follow Rav, if to follow Shmuel. So therefore Ravasi says, Noitel revia bekarka or revia b'mois. When he reimburses his brother for the fact that some of the loan of it that got confiscated from his field, he has to reimburse him halfway. He gives him a quarter from the entire inheritance here. So now half that got confiscated, his karka got confiscated, so he's going to give a quarter. So he doesn't pay the full half that he should have paid him. He pays just a quarter, or a revia b'mois, or he gives him a quarter of money. So that's this Rav Asi over here. So the point is, this is one shot in Rashi, that Rav Asi has the suffix if the paskin like Rav, that he has to reimburse him completely, or the paskin like Shmuel, that he loses everything. So he says he reimburses him halfway. And now here Rav Asi said, when he reimburses him, he doesn't have to actually redivide the karka itself and give him a portion of the karka itself. He has an option to reimburse him with money, with mo'is. Okay, so Oh, here the Gemara spells out here the machlokes. I explained it already, so let's go through this. Rav Amar Batla machlokes. Why is Rav say we nullify the entire division? That once the brothers divide, so they're just like Yerushin. And Yerushin means that now it turns out that this Yerusha was incorrect. It was not divided properly. You have to redivide it. Shmuel Amar Viter, that you lose out. That once they divide it, you're like a buyer. So that's it. I got my part, you got your part. And here there's another very important point, that not only are they like a buyer, but it's like a buyer that the seller is not taking any responsibility if it gets confiscated. Each brother is taking his part, and we're making up what I get, what you get, and we're not going to bother each other about this at all. But that he has to reimburse him halfway, either with karka itself or with money, because he has a doubt. So therefore he says, because of the suffix, he has to reimburse half. So therefore he has to reimburse him either with the revia of the karka, or a quarter of the karka, or a quarter of money. Okay, but what's the point over here? The Gemara is saying that you can't say that when Rav Asi before said that we compare money to karka, that maybe he was referring to this halacha, that when you have to reimburse your brother in such a kind of case, so you have the option to reimburse him not only with the actual Yerusha of the karka, you can reimburse him with money as well. That's not what Rav Asi before was referring to, because Rav Asi already said it over here once. He wouldn't repeat it again. Ella, the Gemara goes back to the original pshat that it suggested. Maya re'en kekarka. What did Rav Asi mean when he said that money is equivalent to a piece of land? Linyan meitav. He was saying this like Rav Huna said regarding meitav, that when you owe money as a mazik, either you pay meitav from the land or you give cash. Says the Gemara, the question we asked, Ihachi hainu de Rav Huna, is saying the same thing as Rav Huna. Answers the Gemara, you're right, amen. So then you have to say, V'chein Amar Rav Asi. Rav Asi said the exact same thing as Rav Huna. Amar Rab Zeire, the Gemara finishes off this Inyan with another Inyan. Rab Zeire said, Amar Rav Huna, the name of Rav Huna, b'mitzvah. When it comes to the money that you spend on a mitzvah, ad shlish. You have to spend on a mitzvah up to a third of the possessions and the money that you own. Says the Gemara, my shlish. What does this mean, that you have to spend up to a third of the money that you own? Ileime shlish beisai. If you would say this means you have to spend a third of all your possessions that you own in your house, all the money you own, you have to give a third for the mitzvah. So if so, elamayata. So if a person has 3 mitzvahs, and for each mitzvah he has to give up, he has to spend a third of all of his possessions, so then leisav l'kula beise, does that mean that he has to be wiped out completely and he's to be penniless? So he has 1 mitzvah, 3 mitzvahs, he's going to have to buy a lulav, tzitzis, and a sefer Torah, so then he has to give everything up from his money? That can't be. So interesting, the Rishonim discussed this over here. What you see over here is, even if there's a mitzvah oiveres, there's a mitzvah that, let's say matzah, whatever it is, that if you're not going to pay for it now, then you won't be able to fulfill the mitzvah. The Gemara here is saying that a person does not have an obligation to give up from all of his money in order to be able to fulfill the mitzvah. That's what you see over here. But the Rishonim still say, though, when it comes to a situation where a person's going to have to spend money in order to prevent himself to be over on a mitzvah loisese, that the Rashba here says a person has to be ready to spend all the money in the world to stop himself from doing an aveda. But regarding doing a mitzvah, here, as you see, the Gemara says you don't have an obligation to give up all your money. So what did Rav Huna mean when he said Atshlish? Elam Rav Zeire says, Behiddur mitzvah, Atshlish b'mitzvah. When it comes to a hiddur mitzvah, so Rashi says what that means is, if a person is buying an esrog, and there's a certain price, and then he sees an even nicer esrog to buy. So he has to be ready to spend on the nicer esrog up to a shlish, a third more than the price of the original esrog that he saw. So a third more in the price. That's what it's referring to. That's Rashi's pshat. Tosfos says similar, but it doesn't refer to the price, the money, but it refers to the actual, let's say, the size of the esrog itself, the quality or the size of the esrog itself. You find one esrog, then you find another esrog that is bigger and better and nicer. So how much nicer do you have to go? A shlish, a third nicer than the original one of what you had. By Ravashi asked about this shear of a shlish. What does this mean? Shlish, milagov, does the shlish mean of the original amount that it is? So the example for this that Rashi gives is, let's say we're talking about $6. What's a shlish of 6? A third of 6. So a third of 6 is 2. So that means you would have to pay $8. That's what the shlish over here means. Oy shlish malabar, or the shlish means in the total sum. After you add a third, then it's a shlish. So if it's 6, so then after you add another 3, so now you have 9. So then If you divide 9 into thirds, so then that's going to be the shlish. After you add a third, and then the total sum, a third of that. That would be the shlish. So again, from 6, that would mean that you have to be ready to add another third to spend on the mitzvah or on the size of the mitzvah. That's the shaila here. So Teiku, this he didn't answer this. The Marava Amri, in Marava it was said, Mishmei de Reb Zera, in the name of Reb Zera, At Shlish, that when a person spends on a mitzvah and he adds for the hiddur of the mitzvah another third, Mishaloi. That's the obligation that he has, that's from him, meaning that that's something that the Eibishter gives him his schar for what he did over here in this world. That's what Rashi says. But mikan ve'elech, but then if a person goes and is mahadr in a mitzvah and adds even more than a shlish, then Mishal HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Then that's not his obligation here for what he has to do in this world. And here the Eibishter will add for him even more, a schar, even more than what he would usually get. That's a special schar that the Eibishter gives him for this. Taisus says it means a keren kayemes lo'ilam haba, oichel peiris ba'olam hazeh, keren kayemes lo'ilam haba. Okay, Zok Heilige Mishnah, going back to the halachas of Bava Kama, the obligations a person has to pay as if something of his possessions damages someone. Says the Mishnah the following rule: Kol shechafti b'shmirasai. Anytime a person has something, a possession, that he has an obligation to guard it, so hichsharti es niskai. So you prepared the nezek that happened. If you had to guard it and you did not, so it's as if you were the one that prepared the damage that just happened, and therefore you're going to be responsible for this. That's one pshat. Another pshat, Rashi says, "Chsharti es niskei" means that now that the damage happens, you have to make good of it. You have to fix it up. That's your responsibility to pay. Now, hichsharti b'miktzas niskei. If there's a situation, and here the word hichsharti means you prepared, you caused some of the damage. The Gemara will explain exactly what this refers to. Chavti b'tashlumi niskei. You're going to be chayiv though to pay in the entire payment of the damage. Kahech shekol niskei, as if you were the one that caused the entire damage, even in a case where you were only the cause of some of the damage, but still you're chayiv to pay for it all. As we'll see in the Gemara. Another halach here, the Mishnah gives different rules when you're chayiv to pay. For what? For whose property that you damaged are you chayiv? It has to be nechasim she'ein be'en mi'ila. This is owned property. Huh? Again. No. This is not talking about shemrim. This is talking about the person's possessions. You own an ox, you own whatever it is, and you have to guard it. And if you did not guard it, so then you're preparing this damage. You're allowing this damage to happen. Now, who do you have to pay to? Nechasim she'ein be'en mi'ila. When you have any possessions or that do not belong to hektish. There's no halacha of me'ila here. So in other words, the whole halacha of paying for a damage is only when it's owned by a private individual. We learned already before in the Gemara, shoyre eyu, and not shoyre of hektish. Or nechasim shel shein shel b'nei beris. You only pay if you damage another yid, not if you damage a guy. Nechasim am yuchadim, and it has to be money that's owned by one person, by an individual, not money that's just hefker. The Gemara will explain exactly what we're coming to exclude. And in any place that you damage someone, but this excludes if you damage someone when he came into your private property. If he came into your private property and there your ox was walking around and went and damaged him, so then you're not responsible for that. He wasn't allowed to come into your property. And then the Mishnah says, Rishus hanizik va'mazik. If there's a property where the nizik and the mazik are allowed to enter here, so here the Gemara will discuss what the Mishnah is trying to say. Are you going to be chayiv or potter? In the Gemara. Now the Mishnah finishes off kishehizik, when your possessions damages someone, chav amazik l'shalom tashlum nezek, the mazik is obligated to pay the damages b'meitav others from the best of his properties. And Rashi says this last line of the Mishnah goes on what the Gemara says before, that we're being marber from this. It said in the first Mishnah shayr, and it didn't spell out what shayr all includes. And here this last line comes to include different things that were not said in the first Mishnah. We learned already about this before on Daf Hey. Okay, so Dr. Gemara, Tana Rabbani, we learned in the Braisa. What does the Mishnah here mean when it says, Kol shechafti b'shmirasa, if you're obligated to guard this, hichsharti es niskai, so if the damage happens, you are the one that prepared and caused the damage. Keitzad, what is this referring to? Shoir, ubayr, if you own an ox, or you have a pit that you dug, shamasra on l'cheresh shaita v'katan, and you gave it over to a cheresh, a deaf mute, or a shaita, a person that's mentally deranged, or a katan that doesn't have the awareness to take care of this. V'ziku, and now it damaged. Chayav l'shalom. The owner of this possessions that gave it to this cheresh shaita v'katan will be obligated to pay. Why are you giving it to a cheresh shaita v'katan that can't take care of this? But in this, the Braisa says that there's an exception for this. Masha'en came be'esh. If you give a fire to a cheresh shaita v'katan and it damages, then you're going to be potter for that. So the Gemara wants to understand what's the meaning of this distinction. But Maya Skina, what are we talking about over here? If you're going to say that we're talking about B'Shoir Kosher, you gave this Cheresh to the cotton and ox, but the share was tied up. Or a buyer, you gave it to his responsibility, a buyer that you dug, but mechusa, it's covered. And the chvasa gabi eish, and then similar when it comes to fire, what is this talking about? Gacheles. You gave him a coal where there's no real fire there. There's a small fire inside the coal, but unless you blow it up and you do something with it, the coal itself will not damage. So why should we make any distinction? Why are we saying that if you give him this ox that's tied and the pit that's covered, so then you're going to be potter, and when you give him this coal where there's no real fire here yet, so why should you again over there by the ox and the bar you chayev, and why by the fire are you going to be potter? What's the difference? Ella says the Gemara b'shar mutter. You gave him an ox that's untied, or bar megula, you gave him an uncovered pit, and over there we understand why the owner should be responsible for this. So the chvasa gabi eish shall heves. So if so, by the fire, we're not talking about you gave him just a coal, but we're talking about a coal that already there's a flame of fire here, and you're giving this to a cheresh to the cotton. So masha'en came be'eish the potter. So you're telling me that if you give him this fire, you're going to be potter for this. Why? But va'omer Rish Lakish. Rish Lakish said, Mishmei the Chizkiah, in the name of Chizkiah, Lo shanu, we didn't learn this halacha that if you gave a gacheles to a cheresh to the cotton and he damaged, you're going to be potter. When are you potter? El shemasale gacheles. That's only if you gave him a coal where there was no fire there that was outside of it. And veliba, and now the cheresh to the cotton went himself and fanned the flames of this fire that was inside the coal, and he brought out the fire. That's something you're not responsible for. Avol shal heves, if you give him a coal that has mamash a flame of fire in it, chayiv, you are going to be chayiv. So that can't be the distinction over here. Why would this brisa say that you're potter? And my time, what's the reason? The habari azeka. You're giving this cheresh to the cotton a flame of fire, and it's definite that it's going to be mazik. So the Gemara answers, goes back to the original pshat. La'olam, the case of this brisa is b'shar kosher. You gave him an ox that was tied up, or bar mechusa, and you gave him a pit that was covered. But still over there you're going to be chayiv. Or the chvasa gabi eish, but in similar, when it comes to the fire, what are we talking about? Gacheles. You gave him a coal that has no fire in it yet. You asked, you asked, what's the difference? Why by the fire are you going to be potter, and why by the boir and the shar are you going to be chayiv? Answers the Gemara, the nature of an ox is that it tears itself out of this. You tied it, it's going to find its way out of it. So when you give it over to cheresh to the cotton, you should expect that to happen. It's your responsibility. And boir darkel in a ture, whatever cover a pit has, it's very common for the cover to go off. So therefore you can't give it a cheresh to the cotton to be responsible for this. Gacheles, on the other hand though, if you're giving him this coal that there's no fire that you see here at all, kama de shavakle, as long as you leave it, mam yami, it keeps on, the fire that's there, very, very little inside, it keeps on getting less and less. So the fact that he made a special effort to go and fan the flames and bring out the fire, that's not something you have to expect, and you're not responsible for that. Ma'ami va'ozla gets less and less. Now the Gemara asks though, there's another opinion on this. Rabbi Yechanan the Amar. Rabbi Yechanan holds afilu masale shal heves nami potter, that even if you give a cheresh to the cotton, a coal with mamish, a flame of fire, you're still going to be potter for this. And the Gemara is still going to explain why. Now the chvasa hacha, now similar over here, when it comes to b'shar mutter. So if you give him a shir, an untied shir, a boir megula, and you give him an open pit, shouldn't it be the same halacha? According to Rabbi Yechanan, there should be no reason to make a distinction. Rabbi Yechanan, it seems like he's saying, even if you give a cheresh to the cotton something that's definite, that it's going to end up damaging, doesn't matter. It seems like what he's saying is, you didn't do the damage with your own hands, you're potter. So if so, why is there a distinction? Why by the shir and boir are you chayiv, and why by the fire are you potter? And says the Gemara, it's not the same thing. Hasam, by the fire, tzafsa the cheresh kagorim. Over there, it's the tongues of the cheresh that he's holding it. He's bringing the fire, and he has to place the fire onto something to go and damage. It's not going to go on its own. The fire doesn't go by itself. It's a coal that stays in one place. He had to physically go and do it. So therefore, for this action, the person that gave it to him will be potter. It's not the action that the cheresh is doing. You're giving this ox to the cheresh. And then what happens? The shir goes on its own. So just like by a owner, but if you have your shirt in your possession, and then the shirt goes and walks on its own and it's mazik, when you give it over to the cheresh and the shirt walks on its own and it's mazik, and the same thing with a buyer. The buyer gets uncovered, or the buyer was uncovered, and the buyer on its own, someone falls on inside of it and is mazik. It's not the cheresh is doing it. When the cheresh is doing it, you're potter. When the shirt and buyer are mazik on their own, so then you're gonna be chayiv, just like when it happens when it's in your possession.